For 2 years, I was invisible to the most dangerous man in Chicago. I typed his reports, managed his schedule, and pretended I didn't notice the men with guns who used his private elevator. Then one night, a rival dared to look at me the wrong way, and Theo Valentini slammed his fist on the table and ended a multi-million-dollar alliance on the spot. That was the night I realized. He had been watching me the entire time. What followed was a love story written in whispered Italian, stolen kisses behind locked office doors, and a war that almost destroyed us both. Someone was sending me death threats. My ex-boyfriend resurfaced with terrifying connections to the Russian Bratva, and the man I loved had to choose between his empire and my life. Before we begin, this story carries a powerful message. Love does not always come dressed in safety. Sometimes the person the world calls a monster is the only one brave enough to protect your heart. And sometimes the most dangerous choice you can make is also the most honest one. If that truth resonates with you, subscribe to this channel and tap the bell, because stories like this one do not come along every day. Now let me take you back to that fluorescent lit office on the night everything changed. The buzz from the fluorescent lights in Theo Valentini's office felt like it was inside my head. For 20 minutes, I stared at a spreadsheet until the numbers swam together. 2 years. I had spent 2 long years mastering the art of being invisible to Chicago's most dangerous man. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to ease an ache that never left. The clock on my screen glowed 9:47 p.m. It was just another night sacrificed to the criminal enterprise disguised as Valentini Industries. Miss Morgan. The voice cut through the silence. Marco Ricci, Theo's second-in-command, stood in the doorway, his face a permanent mask of irritation. Mr. Valentini wants the quarterly reports on his desk by morning, every single one. I pushed down the wave of exhaustion that felt like tears. Of course, I will get them done. He gave a single sharp nod and walked away. The sound of his expensive shoes on the marble floor faded, leaving me alone with the buzzing lights and an impossible task. There were 17 quarterly reports. Each one would take an hour to prepare. The math was simple. It was also cruel. My phone vibrated. A text came from my mother's nurse back in Ohio. The message was short and professional. Treatment was successful today. She is asking for you. A familiar, sharp guilt twisted inside my gut. I had promised to visit her last month. But the overtime I needed to pay for her care had destroyed those plans. It was a cycle I could not escape. I pulled an energy drink from my bottom drawer, my last resort for emergencies like this. As I opened the can, I saw my own reflection in the dark window. I was 26 years old, but looked like I was 40. I had dark circles under my eyes and a jaw that was always tight with stress. But the salary was 3 times what I could earn anywhere else, and the benefits were incredible. I had learned not to ask why a construction company needed this level of security, or why men with guns sometimes came to this floor. I knew exactly who Theo Valentini was. The whole city knew, even if they looked the other way. The papers called him a respected businessman. The streets had a different name for him, but his company always paid on time, which was better than my last legitimate job. I finished the first report in 43 minutes. My fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. I pulled data, checked numbers, and flagged the kind of problems Theo would want to see. I had learned what he liked through his harsh corrections, and the rare grunt of approval that I understood was high praise. At 11:15 p.m., the private elevator chimed. My heart began to pound. It was a reaction I could never control. Theo almost never left before midnight, but his presence changed the air in the room, making everything feel charged with electricity. I stared at my screen, trying to disappear as I heard his footsteps approach. I knew he would walk right past my desk, maybe with a small nod if he felt like it. He would go into his office, shut the door, and I would once again become invisible. But this time, the footsteps stopped. I raised my head slowly, trying to keep my composure. Theo Valentini was standing just 3 feet away. His dark suit was perfect, even this late. His tie was loose, showing the strong line of his throat. He was 34 and moved with the certainty of a man who had never been told no. His stormy gray eyes scanned me, and his gaze was so intense it made my skin feel tight. He had looked at me with that intensity only 3 times in 2 years. Once at my interview, and once at each of my annual reviews. Each time, I felt like he could see every secret I had. "You are still here." His voice was a low rumble, with a hint of an Italian accent that only came out when he was tired. I cleared my throat, hoping I sounded professional. "Marco informed me you required the quarterly reports by the morning. I am nearly done with the third one." An emotion I could not read flashed across his face. "All 17 of them?" "Yes, sir." He was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved from the empty energy drink on my desk to the pile of files, then back to my face. I fought the urge to fidget under his intense watch. "How long have you been with me, Miss Morgan?" The question caught me off guard. "It will be 2 years next month. In all that time, have I ever given you a task that was impossible to complete?" I paused, unsure how to answer. "You have given me difficult tasks, but never impossible ones. 17 reports in—" He glanced at his expensive watch. "7 hours is impossible. I can do it." The words sounded more defiant than I meant them to. His jaw tightened. "I am sure you think you can. But I need my employees to be functional, not exhausted. Finish what you can tonight. The rest will wait for the morning." It was the longest conversation we had ever had, and the kindest thing he had ever said. I did not know what to say. "Thank you, sir." He nodded and started to walk toward his office. I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. My hands were shaking a little as I looked back at my screen, but I could still feel his eyes on me, a heavy presence that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "Miss Morgan." I looked up. He was standing in his doorway, a dark shape against the soft light from his office. "Go home at midnight. It is not a suggestion." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut, but the sound felt as loud as a slam. I stared at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. In 2 years, Theo Valentini had never shown any concern for me. He had never acted like I had limits. He had never looked at me like I was a person. I shook my head, trying to ignore the strange warmth in my stomach. He was my dangerous criminal boss. I was just his efficient secretary, keeping his legal business in order while he managed his dark empire. I completed 6 reports by midnight, and each one was perfect. When I was packing my bag, I saw that the light in Theo's office was still on. He was still working. The next day, I got to my desk at 7:30 a.m. and found a hot coffee from my favorite cafe waiting for me. There was no note, but I knew who it was from. I drank it slowly, trying not to think too much about it. I tried to forget how he had looked at me the night before, as if he had just realized I was a human being. The morning was a rush of calls and emails. Theo had meetings all day. Some were with legitimate contractors. Others were with men who used the private elevator and never signed in. I managed everything with the skill I had developed over 2 years, the unseen director of a very dangerous operation. Around 2 p.m., Marco appeared at my desk. "Mr. Valentini requires your presence in the conference room." My stomach fell. The conference room? Not his office. The conference room now. I picked up my tablet and notebook, my thoughts racing. I had never been called to the conference room before. That room was for important meetings, for deals that built his empire. Secretaries were not supposed to be there. The room was at the far end of the floor, with huge windows that looked out over Chicago. When I walked in, Theo was at the head of the table. 3 other men were with him. I knew 2 of them. The third was a stranger. He was younger, maybe in his early 30s, with the polished look of a man with money and power. He turned when I entered, his eyes showing an interest that made my skin crawl. A sneer. He was talking about me, the secretary. Valentini, you failed to mention her beauty, the man said with a smirk. I kept my face a perfect professional mask, a trick I learned long ago for when men look at you like an object. I found my usual place in the corner of the room, close enough to document the meeting, but distant enough to fade away. Theo's voice was like stone. Miss Morgan manages my schedule. She is here to observe. The stranger, Caruso, smiled wider. A complete waste of talent for simple scheduling. The air in the room grew cold. The other men stared intently at their documents. Theo's face was unreadable, but a dangerous light flashed in his eyes. What Miss Morgan does is my business, not yours. The name clicked. Vincent Caruso. He was the son of a rival, here to negotiate a fragile peace with Theo's family. This was a critical meeting, and I was now at its center. Caruso raised his hands as if to surrender. I intended no offense. I was just curious if your lovely assistant is single. If she is not, I would like to be. Theo's hand struck the table with the force of a gunshot. Papers flew. His associates flinched. I froze completely. The meeting is finished, Theo said. Each word was a cold, sharp weapon. Gentlemen, escort Mr. Caruso from the building. Caruso started to argue. But we are not done. Out. Theo's men moved quickly, flanking Caruso and steering him to the door. He left with a look of confusion and rage. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with Theo in the heavy silence. I needed to leave, to retreat to my desk and forget this. But my feet felt nailed to the floor, trapped by the dangerous energy that filled the room. Theo rose from his chair, his motions slow and deliberate, like a hunter. He circled the table until he stood right before me. I could smell the expensive mix of cedar and smoke from his cologne. I had to crane my neck to look up at him. His voice was a low rumble. For 2 years, I have watched you. For 2 years, I have heard you on the telephone. For 2 years, I have ignored the scent of your perfume. My ability to breathe vanished. This was impossible. Theo Valentini did not see his secretary. He barely knew I was alive. I do not understand, I whispered. He stepped forward, pinning me against the wall. His hands landed on either side of my head, trapping me without touching me. I felt the heat from his body. You believe I did not see you? His gaze burned into mine. You believe I did not notice? I notice every single thing about you, Tessa. He had never called me by my first name. The sound of it from his lips made a shiver run through me that was not from fear. Then why did you not say anything? Because you are my employee, he said, his jaw tight. Because losing you would be a problem. Because I believed I could maintain my self-control and keep you at a distance. His thumb gently brushed my lower lip, and a shock of electricity went through me. But then that animal asked if you were taken. He looked at you as if you were his for the taking. And I lost my mind. My heart pounded in my chest. This was my boss. My very dangerous boss, who had me against a wall and was looking at me like he wanted to consume me. You belong to me, Tessa, he said, his voice rough and possessive. You have been mine from the moment you interviewed in that blue dress, trying so hard to appear fearless. Mine from the first week you stayed late. Mine from the day you learned how I take my coffee without me telling you. Tell me you feel this too. Tell me I have not been suffering alone for 2 years. I should have denied it, pushed him away, remembered my job and the danger he represented. But I was tired of lying to myself. I feel it, I breathed out. The words hung in the air between us, charged and alive. Theo's thumb continued its slow journey across my lip, his eyes growing darker. Say it again. His voice was a raw command. I need to hear it. I feel it. The admission was easier the second time, as 2 years of denial shattered. I have felt it from the very start. I thought I was losing my mind. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half growl. Crazy. Tessa, you cannot imagine what you have done to me, sitting there every day, so professional and out of reach. Do you know how often I wanted to clear that desk? He stopped himself, his jaw clenching as he fought for composure. He dropped his hand and took a step back. The sudden absence of his warmth was like a physical shock. This creates problems. He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up its perfect arrangement. You are my employee. There are protocols. And my life. He gestured around the room, indicating his entire world. My life is not a safe place for a person like you. Reality returned with a cold rush. He was correct. This was not possible. I had to have this job to pay for my mother's medical care and to keep a roof over our heads. And he was Theo Valentini. His business involved things I tried not to think about. His men were armed. His enemies disappeared. I know. I forced my spine straight, gathering what was left of my professionalism. You are correct. We will forget this occurred. I am going back to work. I did not say I was letting you leave. His gaze met mine, intense and stormy. I said this creates problems. That is not the same thing. My heart leaped. What are you trying to say? I am saying that for 2 years I have kept my discipline, 2 years of restraint, and Vincent Caruso just erased all of it by looking at what belongs to me. He moved toward me again, close but not touching. I do not share, Tessa. I do not accept defeat. And I absolutely do not allow other men to believe they can have what is mine. I do not belong to anyone, I said, my voice shaking a little as my body leaned toward him on its own. A dark, predatory smile appeared on his face. Are you sure? Then why is your heart racing? Why are your eyes wide? Why are you breathing so heavily? His hand rested on the wall near my head. Your body accepts the truth, even if your mind still resists it. He was right. I hated it. I hated how my body reacted to him, and how all I wanted was for him to close the distance and kiss me. What do you want? I whispered. Everything, he said. The single word was absolute. But dinner is a start. I just blinked, confused by the sudden return to something normal. Dinner. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. I will be at your apartment. It was a statement, not a question. Mr. Valentini. Theo. His thumb brushed my cheek. You will call me Theo when we are alone. Theo. The name felt strange after 2 years of strict formality. I do not believe this is a good idea. Probably not, he agreed, stepping away to give me room. But I am out of good ideas when it comes to you. Only bad ones are left, and I am finished fighting them. He went back to the table and collected the scattered papers. When he faced me again, he was wearing his familiar, controlled expression. But now I could see the fire underneath. Go back to your desk, Miss Morgan. Finish your reports. And tomorrow, wear something beautiful. He paused at the door. But not too beautiful. With you, my self-control is thin, and I want our first real date to include a meal. He left me shaking there, totally confused, feeling more alive than I had in a very long time. The rest of my workday was a blur. I went back to my desk and tried to work, but my brain just kept replaying what happened in that conference room. The intensity in his eyes, the words he spoke, the promise in his voice when he claimed me. At 5:30 in the evening, Marco showed up as I was clearing my desk. With an unreadable look, he set a small box from Mr. Valentini down. My hands trembled as I opened it and found a brand new phone. It was the best model, already set up. A note inside said, "Your number is saved. So is mine. I expect you to pick up when I call. T." I looked at Marco, full of questions, but he was already gone. That night, inside my small apartment in a part of town Theo probably monitored, I stared at the phone as if it were a snake. It rang at exactly 8:09 in the evening. "Hello, have you eaten?" Theo's voice deeper on the phone sent a chill down my spine. "Yes, I cooked pasta." "What kind?" The question was so ordinary, so completely normal, that I nearly laughed. "Spaghetti with garlic and oil." "Why do you ask?" "I am learning things about you. What you eat, what you enjoy, what brings a smile to your face." He paused. "I have lost 2 years, Tessa. I will not lose another minute. We spoke for an hour, about small things and big things. He asked about my mom, and I heard myself telling him about her sickness, the medical debt, and my guilt for being so far away. He just listened, offering no empty words of comfort. "She is proud of you," he said at last, "for making it in a city like this, for working as hard as you do, for being strong enough to seek help when you had to." I did not ask for help. I only accepted a job. "You accepted a job with the most feared man in Chicago. That requires either courage or desperation." His tone softened. I am guessing it was both. He was right. The following day at work was different. Each time Theo passed my desk, his hand would graze my shoulder or my arm. Once, it was the back of my neck, a touch so quick I thought I imagined it, but the heat it left was real. He invented reasons to have me in his office, asking about schedules he already knew by heart. He would ask for coffee that Marco could have easily brought him. And every time, his gaze would roam over me with a hunger that shattered my focus. At 7 in the evening, he came to my desk wearing a different suit. It was charcoal gray, highlighting his wide shoulders, with a black shirt that turned his gray eyes to silver. "Are you ready?" "I need to go home and change," I said, looking down at my plain work clothes. "You look perfect. The table is booked for 8:30. We can stop at your place first." He knew my address. Of course he did. Theo Valentini knew everything. His car was a black Mercedes with dark windows, just as I had imagined. The driver was one of his most intimidating men. Theo opened my door, his hand resting on the small of my back, a point of heat through my blouse. In the back seat, his leg was firm against mine. His hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine with a possessiveness that should have scared me, but it only made me feel protected. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," I answered. He smiled, a genuine smile that changed his severe face. "Good. So am I. You do not look terrified. I am very good at hiding it. It is a necessary skill." His thumb drew small circles on my inner wrist. "But do not be mistaken, Tessa. This is terrifying. You are terrifying. Because for the first time, I have found something I desire more than control." His words took my breath away. Before I could say anything, the car stopped in front of my building. Theo's face grew dark as he looked at the crumbling exterior. The graffiti, the busted security door, the buzzing streetlight. "How long have you been here?" "Since I came to Chicago. It is what I can afford, and it is near the train." His jaw clenched. "Pack a bag." "What?" "Pack for a few days. You are not staying here again." Fear shot through me. "Theo, I cannot afford another place. I have tried, but with my mother's hospital bills, I am not asking you to afford it." His eyes locked with mine, fierce and absolute. "I am telling you that you will not spend another night here. I own a secure building downtown. There is an empty apartment. It is yours. I cannot take that." "Yes, you can. And you will." He held my face, making me meet his gaze. "I told you. You belong to me now. That means I protect what is mine. And I will not allow what is mine to live in a place that makes me consider posting guards in the hall. This is moving too fast, I know. But I do not do things in halves, Tessa. You should know this about me." In the end, I packed a bag. The truth was, I had been scared in that apartment from day one. Scared of the noises, the faulty locks, the men on the corner. And something in Theo's eyes said that refusing this would wound him in a way that was not about his pride. The restaurant was incredibly exclusive, a place you book months ahead. We were given a private table, away from everyone else. Theo ordered for us in perfect Italian, his accent becoming stronger. "You speak Italian," I noted. My father made sure of it. He said a man should know his heritage. A shadow passed over his face. He made sure of many things. "Is he still around?" "Number." "He passed away when I was 22. He left me his entire operation and all the duties that came with it." He drank some wine. I was not prepared. But you cannot choose when that kind of power comes to you. You either take it or it crushes you. Do you ever wish you had chosen a different path? His smile was grim. Every single day. But wishing changes nothing. This world, this work, it is part of me now. I have accepted it. The food came, one amazing Italian dish after another. We talked as we ate, the conversation surprisingly easy. He asked about my life growing up in Ohio, my reason for moving to Chicago, the dreams I had before life got in the way. I wanted to teach, I confessed. Elementary school. I loved being with children, watching them learn and seeing that spark when they finally understood something. Why did you stop? My mother fell ill the summer before my last year of college. I left school to look after her. I used my tuition savings for her care. By the time she was better, I had debt instead of a diploma. I shrugged. Life took a different turn. Theo's hand covered mine on the table. You gave up your dreams for her. That is not a small thing, Tessa. That is everything. Dessert came. A tiramisu that was pure silk. Theo watched me eat so intensely, I felt myself blush. What? I asked. I am memorizing you. The way your eyes close when you taste something good. The quiet sound you make. The shape of your mouth when you smile. His voice grew deeper. I told you I lost 2 years. I am recovering that time now. Warmth spread through me. Theo, I really want to kiss you. His eyes held mine. I have wanted to kiss you since yesterday. Since last year. Since you came into my office in that blue dress. Then why have you not? Because if I start, I am not certain I can stop. And we are in a public place, and you deserve more than me losing my composure in a restaurant. The drive to his building downtown was agonizing. His hand stayed on my thigh, a silent claim. The warmth of his hand was a fire through my skirt. I could feel. The apartment he had for me was on the 20th floor, with massive windows that showed the entire city. It was furnished, beautiful, and bigger than any place I had ever called home. The building has security around the clock, Theo said, pointing out the safety systems. Marco is on the 15th floor. My own apartment is on the 40th. He gave me a key card. This gives you access to the whole building, including the private elevator to my home. I cannot pay for this. Think of it as a work benefit. He stepped closer, trapping me against the kitchen island. I provide for what belongs to me, Tessa. You need to get used to it. His hand cradled the back of my neck, tilting my face up to his. Tell me to go. Tell me you need more time, or space. Tell me anything but the one thing I want to hear. What do you want to hear? That you feel this just as much as I do. That the last 2 years were as difficult for you as they were for me. That you are finally ready to stop resisting what is between us. I should have told him to go. I should have set rules and insisted we move slowly. But I was done with being sensible, done with denying myself any happiness because life taught me that good things never come without a cost. Kiss me, I whispered. He did not hesitate. His mouth came down on mine, fierce and overpowering. His hands held my face, tilting my head just so. I gasped, and he used the chance to deepen the kiss until my mind went blank. When he finally broke away, we were both breathing hard. He rested his forehead on mine. 2 years, he murmured against my swollen lips. 2 years. I wondered if you tasted this good. You taste better. Theo, I need to go. But he held me in place. If I remain here, I will not stop, and you deserve better than a rushed encounter on your kitchen counter. Maybe I do not want to wait. His eyes became dangerously dark. Do not push me, Tessa. I am barely holding on. His second kiss was softer, almost worshipful, before he pulled away to create a necessary gap between us. Marco will be here in the morning. You will not ride the train again. He walked to the door. And Tessa, lock this after me. Use the alarm. I will know if you do not. I leaned against the door after he was gone, my lips still burning. A message appeared on my phone. Sleep well, my beautiful. Tomorrow, I will teach you what it means to be mine. T. I was in over my head, but I wanted to see what would happen. Sleep did not come easily. Each time I closed my eyes, I felt Theo's hands on me, his mouth taking mine with a breathless hunger. The silence in this new apartment was unnerving. No city sounds, no loud neighbors, no footsteps that made me double-check the locks. 20 stories high, I was in his world now. At 6 in the morning, a text from an unknown number arrived. Marco, lobby in 1 hour. I took a quick shower, the amazing water pressure almost justifying the deal I had made. I saw my reflection in the mirror as I dried myself. My lips looked fuller from his kisses. A faint mark rested on my neck where his thumb had pressed, proof that last night was real. I chose my clothes with purpose. A fitted, professional dress in a deep red. I had owned it for months, but never felt brave enough to wear it. Today was different. I did not want to be invisible. Marco was in the lobby at precisely 7 in the morning, his face impossible to read. He opened the car door silently, and I slid into the back of the black sedan. "Good morning," I tried. "Miss Morgan," he replied, starting the car. "Mr. Valentini wants you to understand the security rules. You have round-the-clock access to his private gym, the roof terrace, and the business center. Report any problems to building management. They will treat your needs as a top priority. That is not necessary. It is done." His gaze met mine in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Valentini protects his own. You are one of his own now. That has its benefits." His tone suggested it also came with responsibilities. I was learning that in Theo's world, nothing was free. The office felt strange when we got there. Or maybe I was the one who felt strange. I did my usual tasks, making coffee and checking his schedule, but I was aware of every little sound. I was waiting for him. He entered at 8:30 in the morning, and the entire atmosphere changed. He wore a navy suit with an open-collared white shirt. His eyes locked with mine instantly, and the intensity I saw there made my throat tighten. "Miss Morgan." His tone was professional, but his eyes said something else. "My office. Now." I grabbed my tablet and followed him, feeling Marco's knowing gaze on my back. The second his office door was shut, he was on me. His hands held my face as he kissed me with a desperate need that took my breath away. "I missed you," he said against my lips. "I spent the entire night thinking about your taste. Theo, we are at work. I do not care." His lips moved to my neck, finding the soft spot that made me weak. For 2 years, I have cared about being proper and professional. I am done. His hands moved down to my hips. "This dress, Tessa. Are you trying to end me?" "I hoped you would approve." "Approve?" He stepped back, his eyes darkening. "I want to take it off you piece by piece. But we have an issue." "What issue?" "I have meetings all morning, one with the Caruso family about yesterday." His jaw clenched. "Vincent will be there. I need you to stay away from the conference room. Stay locked in here until they are gone. That is not reasonable." "I have work." "Tessa." His voice was dangerously calm. "I barely restrained myself yesterday. If he says your name today, I will put a bullet in his head. To hell with the alliance. So you will stay in my office unless you wish to see a man die." The casual way he spoke of killing should have scared me. Instead, a dark excitement shot through me at his possessiveness. I could feel the violence simmering just beneath his skin. "Okay," I agreed in a whisper. He gave me another, softer kiss. "I will have lunch delivered for us, just the two of us." His thumb brushed my lip. "And tonight, I am taking you somewhere I can touch you without any witnesses." He pulled back with visible effort. "Work from my desk today. Text me if you need anything. Do not leave this room until I return for you." The morning passed slowly. I sat in his leather chair, which still held his warmth and his scent. I could hear muffled arguments from the other room as the business of his empire continued. At 11 in the morning, the voices grew louder. The Italian was too fast for me to understand, but the fury was clear. Then I heard Theo's voice, cold and powerful, cutting through the noise. It was followed by complete silence. My phone vibrated. "Stay where you are. Everything is under control. T." He came back at 12:30 in the afternoon. He looked furious, his body tense. He locked the door. "What was that?" I asked. "Vincent implied my feelings for you were affecting my business decisions." He violently loosened his collar. His father agreed. He suggested I should share you to keep peace between our families. A cold fear gripped me. They want nothing. I told them you are not part of any deal. I made it clear that any man who looks at you will answer to me." He went to the window, his back rigid. "I might have just destroyed an alliance worth millions. My people think I am losing my mind." "Are they?" he asked, turning to face me, his expression wounded. "Probably. But it does not matter. You are worth more than any deal." He crossed the room in 3 steps. "Do you see what you have done to me? My entire life is built on control and logic. I never let feelings get in the way. Then you appeared and ruined it all." His hands held my face, a mix of urgency and tenderness. "I should send you away. Somewhere safe, far from all this. I should give you money so you never have to work again. That would be the right choice. But you will not do that." "No." He pressed his forehead to mine. "Because I am a selfish man. I have tasted you and I cannot go back. The idea of another man having you makes me want to set the world on fire. I do not want you to send me away. You should. You should run. But I will not." I looked into his dark, dangerous eyes and I did not flinch. "I am choosing this. I am choosing you." Something inside him seemed to break. He kissed me with a raw desperation, his hands twisting in my hair as he pushed me back against his desk. Papers flew everywhere. I did not care. All that mattered was him. The knock was sharp. We froze. It was Marco, Theo's man. The Bratva representative was early. Theo's head fell to my shoulder, his breathing heavy. Marco said they had 5 minutes. It was urgent. His footsteps faded down the hall. Theo's hands shook as he fixed my hair and straightened my dress. His gaze was distant. He had promised tonight was ours. No work. Just us. He kissed me gently one last time. Then he straightened his collar, swept back his hair, and became someone else. He was Theo Valentini again. Cold, controlled, dangerous. He told me to stay put. Lunch would be sent up. After he was gone, I sank into his chair, my body trembling with adrenaline. This was reckless, but I had wanted him to continue. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You are playing a dangerous game, Miss Morgan. Theo Valentini breaks everything he touches. You will be next." The words turned my blood to ice. I sent the message straight to Theo. His reply came back in seconds. "Do not respond. Do not worry. I have this handled." Lunch arrived at 1 o'clock. It was from the most expensive Italian restaurant in the city. Marco brought it himself, with a bottle of water and a note. "I ordered your favorites. Eat. You need to be strong for tonight." Signed, T. How did he know my favorite foods? Then I recalled 2 years of lunch orders. 2 years of my preferences being noted. He had been watching the entire time. The afternoon felt unreal. I did my work, answering emails and managing schedules. They were normal tasks in a situation that was anything but normal. Each time my phone vibrated, my heart pounded. At 5:30, he was at my door. "Ready? We are going home." My home. He offered me his hand. "I want to show you something." The private elevator opened onto the 40th floor. The penthouse was more of a museum than a place to live. Windows stretched from the floor to the ceiling, showing all of Chicago. The space was perfect, expensive, and cold. "This is where I sleep," he said. "I do not live here." He led me to a set of double doors. "But this room is different." He opened them to a library. Unlike the rest of the home, this room felt warm and used. Books lined the walls. A worn leather chair sat near the window. "This is where I go when the weight is too much," Theo said. He took a worn book from a shelf. "My mother gave me this. The Count of Monte Cristo. She said it was about a man who lost it all and got it back with patience and careful planning. My mother taught me that revenge is best when it is cold, but love is meant to be hot. She died when I was 16. Cancer. My father fell apart. He grew colder, more ruthless. He told me that grief was a weakness that could get a man killed." Theo set the book down. I think he was just terrified of feeling anything after he lost her. I stepped toward him, hearing the pain in his voice. "Is that what you are afraid of? Feeling?" "I am afraid of what I feel with you," he admitted. "I am afraid of losing control. I am afraid I will hurt you. You deserve better than this life, Tessa. Better than me." "Maybe I do not want better," I said. "Maybe I just want you." He kissed me slowly, then looked into my eyes. "I need to tell you how this life started for me." We sat together in the large leather chair. For the first time, Theo Valentini, a man feared by half the city, let someone see the man behind the reputation. "My father was old school mafia," he said. "He raised me to take over, like it was a birthright. I had no choice. When I was 22, a rival family had him killed. They thought our organization would die with him." His jaw was tight. They were wrong. I took control immediately. I hunted down everyone responsible for his death. I made brutal public examples of them. "I was young," he said. "I was full of grief and rage. I convinced myself I was doing it for my father's legacy. But the truth is, I enjoyed the power. I liked the control. I became exactly the man my father wanted me to be, a monster to run his empire." "You are not a monster," I told him. He shook his head. "I have killed men, Tessa. I have ordered deaths and ruined lives. The good things I do are for guilt, not goodness. The scholarships, the donations, they cannot balance the scales." He faced me. "I am telling you this because you have to know what you are choosing. Once we cross this line, once you are truly mine, you cannot go back. You will be in this world forever." "What if I already crossed that line?" I asked, touching his face. "What if I crossed it 2 years ago?" His eyes darkened with intensity. "Then God help us both." He kissed me with a fierce gentleness. His hunger was obvious, but his hands were careful. He stood and lifted me into his arms, carrying me to the bedroom. The room was sparse. It held only a massive bed and windows that overlooked the city lights. He set me on my feet. "Last chance," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me to stop. Tell me you need time. Say anything but yes." "Yes," I whispered. He needed to hear it clearly. "Yes to you. To this. To whatever is next." Possession flashed in his eyes. "You are mine now. Do you understand? Mine to protect. Mine to cherish." His thumb traced my lip. "Mine to claim." "Then claim me," I said. And he did. The world outside, with all its dangers and problems, simply vanished. Later, lying in his arms, I felt his lips in my hair. "I will not let anything happen to you," he murmured. "You are under my protection now." I finally told him I was falling in love with him. He stopped everything. He tilted my face toward his. His eyes burned in the dark. He said he fell for me the day I stayed late without being asked, the day I made his coffee without instructions. He said I looked at him like a man, not a monster. He kissed me gently. He told me he had been mine for 2 years. He was just glad I was finally his. Golden light filled Theo's bedroom. I woke up slowly. Silk sheets touched my bare skin. A heavy arm was draped over me. A warm body was pressed against my back. The memories of last night returned. Theo had touched me with a tenderness that defied his reputation. He whispered beautiful Italian words I could not understand but felt deep inside. He held me afterward like I was precious, like I might vanish. You are thinking too loud. His voice was rough with sleep. His lips brushed my shoulder. I can hear you from here. I told him I was just processing everything. He asked if I had regrets. There was a hidden vulnerability in his voice. I turned to face him. The morning light softened his features. He looked younger. Dark hair fell over his forehead. His jaw was shadowed with stubble. His gray eyes were so intense they stole my breath. No regrets, I whispered. But what happens now? Do we pretend at the office? No pretending, he said. His hand cupped my cheek. I am done hiding how I feel. Everyone will know you are under my protection by the end of the day. They will know you are mine. I asked if that would make me a target. A dark look crossed his face. It makes you untouchable. Anyone who thinks of hurting you will answer to me. Marco is assigning you a security detail. I asked him what he meant. He said it was not negotiable. His voice turned to steel. You are with me now. That comes with danger. I will not risk your safety. I wanted to argue for my privacy, for my independence, but I knew his world was dangerous. His enemies disappeared. They would see me as a weakness. Okay, I finally said. But they have to be subtle. I cannot have armed men following me around. A small smile appeared on his lips. He said Marco's team was good at being invisible. Most of the time I would not even see them. But in some situations, my protection would be more important than discretion. He told me I would have to trust him. His phone buzzed 3 times. He sighed and checked the messages. His face grew dark. The Caruso family was angry about yesterday's meeting. Vincent's father wanted an apology. Theo's jaw was tight. They threatened to break our shipping deal and work with the Moretti family instead. I asked him what he would do. He said he would handle it. He put the phone down and looked at me again. But first, he would make me breakfast. He said he enjoyed taking care of me and had nothing scheduled until 10 o'clock. I asked if he could cook. He said his mother insisted. She believed a man who could not feed himself was not a real man. He got out of bed and pulled on black boxer briefs. Stay here, he said. I will bring it up. I watched him go. This was all happening so fast. Just yesterday, I was his secretary. Now, I was in his bed, wearing his protection. I was stepping into a world I did not understand. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marco. It said my security detail was assigned. Officer Chen would meet me at the office. Then a second text came from a number I did not know. It said to enjoy it while it lasted, that Theo always got bored with his toys. A chill went through me. I deleted the message, but my hands were trembling. Who sent that? How did they get my number? Theo came back 20 minutes later with a tray. There were scrambled eggs, bacon, fruit, and my coffee, made perfectly. He wore gray sweatpants that hung low on his hips. His chest was bare. I saw a long, jagged scar along his ribs. It was from a knife, not a surgeon. I touched it and asked what happened. He said it was 5 years ago. A rival thought a blade would make a stronger point than words. Theo's voice was calm, but his eyes were cold. He said the man was wrong. I asked if he had hurt him back. Yes, he said, without regret. The man used a knife. I used a gun. The result was predictable. I should have been scared. I should have been horrified by the violence. Instead, I traced the scar. It was proof that he could be hurt, that he had survived. He noticed I was not scared of him. There was wonder in his voice. I asked if I should be. He said most people were, especially women. I told him I was not most women. I met his eyes and said I knew he had hurt people, but I did not believe he would ever hurt me. Never, he said. The word was a promise. I would destroy the world before I let anyone harm you. We ate breakfast together. It felt so normal, so unreal. Theo Valentini fed me strawberries and stole kisses. He made me laugh with stories about his nephew. He was showing me the man behind the monster. At 9:30 we got dressed. I wore a new black dress and a leather jacket. Theo watched me. He said I looked like I belonged to him. It was everything, he said. He pulled me close. He told me we were having dinner with his sister and her husband that night. They wanted to meet the woman who had finally broken his self-control. Panic rose in my chest. I asked if it was too soon to meet his family. He said his sister Rosa had been asking him for months to bring someone to dinner. He promised she would love me. And if she did not, it would not matter. I was his. The drive to work was different. His hand rested on my thigh. He pointed out buildings he owned, businesses he controlled. He was showing me his kingdom. Marco was in the garage when we arrived. He was with a small Asian woman in her early 30s. Her blazer did not completely hide her weapon. Marco introduced her as Officer Chen. She was former Secret Service, an expert in protection. She would be my primary security. Chen shook my hand and told me to call her Amy. She said she would stay close but out of sight. She added that if there was a threat, she would become very obvious. In those moments, I had to follow her instructions without question. My safety was her only job. Theo put his hand on my back. He said Amy had total authority. She could cancel any plans, even his, if she felt it was unsafe. Her word was final. The reality of the situation hit me. This was my life now. I was not just dating my boss. I was in a world that needed armed guards, a world where threats were normal. A stranger was now in charge of keeping me alive. The elevator was crowded with Theo, Marco, Amy, and me. When the doors opened, the office was quiet. People were staring and whispering. The news had spread. Theo kept his hand on me as we walked to my desk. It was a public claim. Amy stood against the wall, watching. "We have a conference call in 30 minutes, Theo announced for the whole office. "Miss Morgan, I need you in my office for notes." The excuse was weak, but it worked. I felt their stares as I picked up my tablet and walked behind him. He shut the door and immediately pulled me close. "Just ignore them," he said. "Let them talk. It will all be forgotten by next week." He said they were fools if they thought I got my job through anything but hard work. His gaze turned sharp. "If anyone says a word to you, they will be fired before they can blink." The call was with investors for his restaurant chain. I took notes and watched him become the perfect businessman. He was charming and persuasive, with no sign of the danger he kept hidden. As soon as the call finished, Marco was at the door. "We have a problem with the Carusos," Marco said. "Vincent's father is here with a lawyer." Theo's face went cold. "Put them in conference room 1, he ordered. "Get the advisors. Get Franco on the phone now." He looked at me. "Stay here and lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but Marco or Amy." His hand touched my cheek. "I need you to be safe while I handle this, please." I agreed, and he gave me a hard kiss before leaving. Amy came in just as the door shut. "I will stay with you," she said. It was a tense hour. I tried to focus, but every shout from the other room startled me. I heard a loud crash, like breaking glass. Then I heard Theo's voice, quiet and lethal, slicing through the noise. My phone vibrated. It was another unknown number. The message said he would get me killed and that I should leave. I handed the phone to Amy. She read it without a change in her expression. "Marco will trace this number," Amy said. "Do not reply." I asked her who could be sending the messages. She said Theo has many enemies. Some might use me to get to him. Others might think they are protecting me. Her gaze was direct. "My only job is to make sure you stay alive." At last, the doors to the conference room opened. I heard Theo's voice, cold as steel. "You tell Vincent that if he ever comes near Tessa again, I will personally put a bullet in his head. That is not a threat. It is a promise." There was silence, then the sound of the elevator. Theo stood in the doorway. His tie was loose and his knuckles were bleeding, but he looked satisfied. "It is done," he said. I asked what happened. He explained they wanted money to make up for the insult to Vincent. He walked to his desk and poured a whiskey. I told them no, he said. They threatened to work with the Morettis and block our shipping routes. He drank the whiskey quickly. I reminded them the FBI is watching the Morettis. Working with them would be a mistake. They finally gave up when he told them he would destroy his own ships before paying them for their pride. He looked straight at me, and I made it clear that you are not to be touched. Anyone who tries to use you against me will face severe consequences. His voice was full of violence, but I was not afraid. I felt safe, as if he were a storm that protected me from the world. Come here, he whispered. I went to him. He held me tightly, his heart beating fast against me. You are a target now because of me, he said. Everyone knows you are mine. I knew he was right. And you will still stay? He asked. I looked at him. I will still stay. His eyes showed relief and something more possessive. He kissed me with an intensity that sealed our bond. Suddenly, the door flew open. Marco looked serious. Boss, we have a problem. The Brata hit one of our warehouses. We have 3 men down. Theo changed in an instant. The gentle man was gone, replaced by a cold leader. How many dead? He asked. 2 dead. 1 is critical, Marco replied. Pull everyone out, Theo commanded. Secure our other locations. I want to know who did this by tonight. Marco left. Theo faced me, his eyes like stone. This is my world, Tessa. It is dangerous. He touched my cheek, his gesture soft despite his anger. This is your last chance. Leave now, and I will keep you safe somewhere else. But if you stay, you are part of this completely. I thought about my mother's medical bills, which were finally paid. I thought about the tiny apartment I never wanted to see again. For 2 years, I had just been surviving. But with Theo, I felt alive. I felt important. I am all in, I told him. He gave me a fierce smile. Then hold on, Balamia, he said. This is only the start. The attack on the warehouse changed our relationship. There was no more slow courtship. His world and mine were now one. That night, we were not having dinner with his sister. We were in a crisis meeting with his most trusted men. I sat quietly in the corner with Amy beside me, watching Theo take command. The attack was not random, Marco stated, showing them photos. They knew our security schedule. Someone inside gave them information. A traitor, Theo said, his voice flat and cold. Salvatore, his main advisor, spoke up. It could be the Carusos getting back at us. A younger man named Dante looked at me for a second. The timing seems strange, he said to Theo. You go public with a woman, and suddenly we are attacked. The air in the room grew cold. Theo's relaxed hand on the table tightened into a fist. Are you saying this is my fault? Dante looked scared. I am saying our enemies might think you are weak now. Theo's voice was low. Then they are about to learn a lesson. They will learn what happens when they mistake love for weakness. Theo looked at every man in the room. Tessa is staying. She is under my protection, which means you will all protect her. If anyone disagrees, you can leave now. The room was silent. Good, he said. Marco, check the records of everyone with access to that warehouse. I want you to look at their finances and offer $100,000 for any information. The meeting went on, but I could only think about what Dante said. Was I the reason people were dead? After the meeting, Theo dismissed everyone but Marco. When the door closed, he turned to me. Stop, he said sharply. Do not blame yourself for any of this. I asked how he knew what I was thinking. Because I know you, he replied. That sharp, caring mind of yours is already trying to blame yourself. He knelt in front of me, so we were at eye level. The Bratva made a move because they saw a chance to expand. They planned this for months. You are not the reason, Tessa. You are just the excuse Dante used. But he might be right. Maybe you are distracted. I am focused, he said, framing my face with his hands. For the first time, I have something to protect beyond this business. That does not make me weak. It makes me more dangerous. Now I have something to lose. Marco cleared his throat. Boss, we need to get you both out of here. This building is not safe if the Bratva is active. I have already called the estate, he said. It has a full security team and a secure perimeter. Theo nodded and looked at me. Pack a bag from your apartment. We are going to my family's estate until this is over. I asked how long that would be. As long as it takes, he said. His face was grim. Until I have finished this. We had to get my things. The drive was tense. Amy, my guard, sat in the front seat, her hand resting near her gun. Marco drove, his eyes checking every mirror. I was in the back between Theo and another guard. I felt both protected and trapped. Tell me about the estate, I said, to break the silence. It is where I was raised, he said. It is an hour north, on Lake Michigan. My grandfather built it in the 1950s. 20 private acres. My sister Rosa lives in the guest house there. You are fine with her meeting me like this? She has been asking to meet you for a week, he said. She will be thrilled. A small smile appeared on his face. My nephew Marco is 8. He will probably ask you if you play video games. The simple talk of video games and family felt like it came from another lifetime. We stopped at my apartment just long enough for me to pack a few bags. Amy came with me. Her presence was both a comfort and a warning. She searched every room, every closet, and checked the windows. Clear, she said, but be quick, we cannot stay here long. Back in the car, we drove north out of the city. I watched the lights fade away. I felt like I was leaving my entire life behind me. What are you thinking? Theo asked gently. I was thinking that 3 days ago I was just a secretary worried about rent. Now I am running from the city because the Russian mob is after my boyfriend, the head of the Italian Mafia. He considered my words. Boyfriend is too simple for what we are. What are we then? He was quiet for a moment. You are mine, and I am yours. Everything else is just semantics. Power is supposed to protect. When it fails, people die. That is the lesson of Theo's world. The lesson I learned arriving at a stone mansion that was less a home and more a fortress. Armed guards moved along its edge. As our car stopped, a small woman with dark hair appeared on the steps. Her eyes were the same storm gray as Theo's. She called out his name with a warmth I had never heard him receive. It was his sister, Rosa. He climbed out and pulled her into a hug. She then turned her kind eyes to me. You must be Tessa, she said. The woman who reminded my brother he is human. She took my arm and pulled me toward the house, and I knew I had found a friend. Rosa led me through the enormous home. She told me Theo had been impossible for 2 years. He was moody and distracted, lost in the shadows of his life. She had never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at me. She said it was like I was the only real thing in his world. She showed me to a guest suite on the 2nd floor. She promised my things would arrive soon and told me her own home was nearby if I ever needed an escape. I thanked her, but she thanked me instead. For making Theo happy, for giving him something to care about beyond the violence. She said he deserved it. After she was gone, I stood alone in the huge, quiet room. The suite was 3 times the size of my apartment. It had a massive bed and windows that looked out over a dark lake. The closet was filled with new clothes in my size. It was all a gift from Theo. I was holding a beautiful dress when the door opened behind me. Theo stood there, his sleeves rolled up. Exhaustion was carved into his face. He moved into the room and pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. 2 men died today, Tessa. His voice was heavy. They were good men with families. He said it was his fault for not seeing the threat, for not having better security. I told him he could not control everything. But in his world, a lack of control meant death. He said this was why he had to keep me safe, no matter the cost. Losing me was not an option. A sudden knock at the door made us both freeze. A voice came through the wood. It was Marco. He said they had a lead on the informant. The traitor was a warehouse guard named Tommy Ricci. He was Marco's cousin. The man had taken money from their enemies and disappeared. Theo's body went completely stiff. He asked where Marco was. Marco was downstairs, waiting for orders. Theo closed his eyes, and a flash of pure pain crossed his face. He told Marco he would be down in 5 minutes. When the footsteps faded, he turned back to me. His face was a mask of torment. He explained that Marco was his most trusted friend. But Marco's cousin had betrayed them all, getting 2 men killed. He said tradition demanded that Marco handle it, that Marco must be the one to eliminate the threat his own family created. His voice was raw. He did not want to ask his best friend to hunt down and kill his cousin. He did not want to live in a world where that was necessary, but it was the only world he had. He knew that any sign of weakness would be an invitation for his enemies to attack. He kissed me softly, then told me to lock the door. "I have to go be the monster now," he said. He had to protect me from this part of his life. He left me alone at the window, staring out at the dark water. Downstairs, Theo was deciding who lived and who died. Across Chicago, people were being hunted, and I was trapped in a fortress, wondering if love could ever close the distance between our two worlds. My phone vibrated. It was another unknown number. The message was clear. "He can never truly protect you. Too many people want to use you to hurt him. Get out while you have the chance. This is your only warning." I deleted it, my hands trembling. Amy appeared in the doorway, sensing my fear. "Another one?" I just nodded. She held out her hand for the phone. As she looked through it, her face grew serious. "They are using multiple numbers routed through a sophisticated network. What does that mean for me? It means this is not a random threat. Whoever is doing this has money and technical skill." She returned my phone. "Mr. Valentini needs to get you a new, secure device. Until then, do not answer any unknown numbers." "Are they serious about the danger?" Amy's gaze was direct. "Anyone close to Theo Valentini is always in some danger. The real question is if these are credible threats or just attempts to scare you. We have to find out." I stayed in the suite all night, too nervous to move. Rosa knocked around midnight carrying a tray. "Theo figured you would not come down. He is still handling business, so I brought you something." She placed the food on the table. "And wine. You look like you need it." As we sat, I told her everything. How Theo and I came to be here, the constant threats, the heavy guilt over the warehouse attack. Rosa listened patiently. When I was done, she took my hand. "My brother has been training for this life since he was a boy. He understands the risks and the consequences, and he is choosing you." She looked right at me. "That should tell you everything about what you mean to him. Theo does not make choices like this lightly. But people are dying because of me. People are always dying in this world," she said gently. "That is not your fault. It is the fault of men who choose violence, who see human lives as pieces in their power games." She paused. "My husband, Antonio, was an accountant when I met him. He was completely outside of this life. When he learned about my family, he had to choose. He could run, or he could stay. He stayed. And yes, it is hard. It is scary. But I have never regretted my choice, and neither has he. How do you live with the fear? I remember that each day with him is worth it. Love is not supposed to be safe. It is supposed to be real." She smiled. "I also take kickboxing, keep a weapon nearby, and get weekly security updates. Practical steps for an impractical life." We talked for another hour. By the time Rosa left, I felt more grounded in my decision. Theo came in around 2 in the morning, looking worn out. He moved quietly, but I was awake. "How did things go?" "It is handled." His voice was flat. "Marco is taking care of his cousin, the Bratva connection is gone, and I have increased security everywhere." He began to undress with robotic movements. I saw fresh bruises on his ribs and a cut on his cheek. "What happened to you?" The interrogation became physical. He did not give up the information easily. He met my gaze. "Do you want the details? I can give them to you, but they are not pleasant." "No, I do not need to know." A wave of relief washed over his face. Good. There are parts of my world I never want you to see. Dark things I never want to touch you. He got into bed and pulled me close. His heart was pounding. This was not the confident man from the office. This was someone crushed by the weight of his choices. I am proud of you, I whispered. He stiffened. For what? For trying to shield me from the darkness. For caring enough to keep your world separate. For being human under all that armor. He held me tighter. I love you, he said, his voice raw. I know it feels fast. We have only been together a few days, but I have loved you for 2 years. I cannot hide it anymore. I love you too, I replied. And I meant every word. We fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, two people trying to build a bridge between our separate lives. The next 3 days at the estate were a strange mix of vacation and lockdown. Theo was in constant meetings, planning his response to the Bratva. I tried to find a routine. Rosa became my guide to this new world. Never ask about business directly, she told me over coffee on the 4th day. If Theo wants you to know, he will tell you. Asking forces him to either lie or put you in more danger by telling you the truth. That sounds like it creates mistrust. It is how we survive. What you do not know cannot be forced out of you. She said it casually, as if torture was a normal risk of the job. Not that they would touch you now, but the rule is important. I was learning the language of this life. Handled meant someone was killed. Relocated meant they had disappeared. A conversation was a brutal interrogation. On the 5th morning, Theo found me on the terrace. The grass was silver with frost. He draped a blanket over me and held me. The situation is under control, he said. Marco found the men responsible for the warehouse. We sent a clear message. Any more aggression will be met with overwhelming force. I have shown them what happens when they come after what is mine. They are backing down for now. His arms held me close. We can go back to the city today, if you are ready. We can try to have a normal life. Normal life? The words felt strange. Is that even possible? I do not know, but I want to try with you. He turned me to face him, his gray eyes intense. I want to take you to dinner where guards are not watching every table. I want to wake up with you without planning our defenses. I want to give you a life you deserve. What if the life I deserve has you in it, guards and all? A soft smile touched his lips. Then I am the luckiest man alive. We went back to Chicago that afternoon. The penthouse felt different, like it was our home. He had made space in his drawers and bathroom for my things. He even stocked the kitchen with food I liked. I called your mother's hospital, he mentioned that evening. I spoke with her doctors about her treatment. I nearly dropped my knife. You did what? I hope you do not mind. I know it is a private matter, but I wanted to see if there were better options, model. He focused on the vegetables he was cutting. They had found a new treatment, an experimental one with good results, but insurance refused to pay. I got her into the trial. Everything is paid for. My throat closed with emotion. Theo, you cannot do this. It is nothing. He finally met my eyes. Your mother is sick. You have carried this weight by yourself for years. You belong to me now, Tessa. Your problems are my problems. I moved behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist, resting my head against his back. Thank you, I whispered, for seeing me, for caring about what I care about. Always, he vowed. That night, lying together in his bed, he drew circles on my skin. I need to ask you something. His serious tone made me anxious. What is it? There is a charity gala next month. All the important families will be there, from legitimate businessmen to people like us who live in the shadows. It is a safe place, a way to project unity and power. He paused for a moment. I want you to go with me, but as my partner, not my assistant. Is that not dangerous? Amy will be there with half of my security detail. The event itself is untouchable ground. No one is allowed to be violent. Everyone follows that rule because the punishment for breaking it is extreme. His finger traced the line of my collarbone. But going would send a public message. Everyone in Chicago will know you are mine. They will know you have my protection. There will be no more questions. And that is what you want. I want to show you to the world. I want every man in that room to know that you are with me, that you are important to me. Anyone who even considers hurting you will have to deal with me directly. He gave me a soft kiss. But you have to be ready for that kind of attention. After this, you can no longer be just my secretary. You will be Tessa Morgan, Theo Valentini's woman, with all that title means. I remembered the threats I had received, the danger that was already my life, and the warehouse fight that left 2 men dead. I remembered my mother in Ohio, who was finally getting the care she needed. I remembered waking up beside Theo each morning, and how he looked at me as if I was his entire universe. I am ready, I told him. He smiled, a fierce and possessive look. Good. I will send Rosa to take you shopping. You need a gown that will make everyone stop and stare. I want every single person in that room to know what I have. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Rosa acted as my stylist, my guide, and my friend. We visited exclusive shops for hours, looking at dresses that cost more than my old yearly salary. We chose a dark emerald gown that followed my every curve. It had a high slit on the leg and a neckline that was bold, but still tasteful. Theo will lose control when he sees you, Rosa said, pleased. Every man there will desire you, and every woman will despise you. Perfect. At the office, things were different. People stopped whispering when I walked by. They greeted me with a new level of respect. I was not simply Theo's secretary anymore. I was his partner. That title had influence. Yet the threatening texts did not stop. They came from new numbers at different hours, but the message was identical. Leave him before you get hurt. Amy was investigating, but had found no solid leads. Whoever is sending these is good at hiding. They use multiple networks, disposable phones, and complex routing. This is not some amateur. Could it be the Brada? I asked. Maybe they are trying to scare me away. It is possible, but the tone feels more intimate, like it is from someone who knows you, someone who believes they are protecting you. She looked thoughtful. We will continue to investigate. For now, be aware of your surroundings. If something seems wrong, call me right away. The evening of the gala finally came. I took hours to prepare. My hair was styled in a formal knot, and my makeup was striking yet elegant. The emerald dress fit me as if it were a second skin. When I walked out of the bedroom, Theo was in the living room. He wore a tuxedo and looked like he had stepped off a magazine cover. His response was exactly what Rosa said it would be. His eyes went dark, his jaw tightened, and he walked across the room in 3 long steps. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, he breathed out. He kissed me gently, aware of my makeup, his hands gliding over the fabric of my dress. I am going to be fighting men off all night. I only have eyes for one man, I told him as I fixed his bow tie. Good answer. He stepped away with reluctance. Amy and Marco are coming with us. Do not leave my side. If anyone bothers you, you tell me instantly. And if I give you a sign, he said, touching his right ear, you leave with Amy. Do not ask questions. You are frightening me. Good. Fear makes you pay attention. Attention keeps you breathing. His voice softened. But I swear to you, Tessa, I will not let anything touch you. I would die before I let anyone harm you. The gala took place at the most exclusive hotel in the city. The ballroom was like a scene from a dream, with crystal lights, marble floors, and tables covered in silk and flowers. The most powerful people in Chicago moved through the room in expensive suits and dresses, a brilliant show of money and influence. But under all the glamour, I sensed the quiet threat. I saw the way bodyguards stood, how people moved around each other, always knowing who was close. I saw the tense looks between enemies who had to act civil. Theo held me close, his hand resting possessively on my lower back. We walked through the room, greeting business partners and acknowledging other powerful families. It was a careful performance of respect and silent warnings that defined their world. Theo Valentini, a voice said. I looked and saw an older, well-dressed man coming toward us. His silver hair was brushed back, and his tuxedo was perfect. A younger, handsome man with cold eyes walked behind him, radiating a sense of danger. Don Moretti. Theo's voice was flat. And Lorenzo. I did not know your family was coming. We could not miss it, the Don said with a smooth voice. Not after we heard you were bringing a new guest. His gaze passed over me, judging me. I kept my face blank, recalling Rosa's words. Do not show fear. Do not show weakness. In their world, those were invitations for an attack. My fiancé, Theo stated, his voice hard as iron. Tessa Morgan, fiancé. My heart leaped, but I did not let it show on my face. This was all a show, a move to claim power. A pleasure, Don Moretti said, but his eyes were still icy. Lorenzo, greet Miss Morgan. Lorenzo came forward, and I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Maybe he recognized me, or maybe he was calculating. It is a pleasure. Tell me, Miss Morgan, how does a woman like you get involved with a man like Valentini? I could ask you the same thing about your own family, I answered. My voice was light, but it had a sharp edge. How does anyone find themselves in their situation? Is it choice, luck, or destiny? A hint of amusement appeared on Lorenzo's face. She has some fire. Be careful, Valentini. Fire can be dangerous, or it can be addictive, Theo answered, pulling me nearer. Now if you will pardon us, gentlemen, my fiancé has promised me a dance. He guided me to the dance floor, his hand firm at my waist. As we danced, he leaned in, his lips near my ear. Fiancé, I whispered, I did not mean to ask you like this. But when that monster looked at you like a piece of property, I had to say something. He drew back, his gaze holding mine. We can make this real with a proper proposal, or we can use it as a convenient story. The choice is yours. What if I want it to be real? Fire ignited in his eyes. Then say yes. I whispered the word, yes. He kissed me then, on that crowded dance floor, in front of the city's most powerful people. He claimed me in public, making it irreversible. When we finally parted, I saw Rosa smiling from across the room. Marco gave a nod of approval. Other faces watched us. Some seemed pleased, others were calculating. A few were dark with envy. The evening became a blur of champagne, congratulations, and conversations heavy with unspoken meaning. Theo stayed by my side, a constant shield. But as we walked through the hotel lobby to leave, I saw a face in the crowd that made my blood run cold. It was Mark, my ex-boyfriend. He was staring right at me, and I froze. I must have gasped. Theo stiffened beside me. What is it? Nothing, I lied. I just thought I recognized someone. His eyes swept the lobby, but Mark had already vanished into the crowd. Who? I shook my head. No one important. Just a person from my past. We reached the car safely, but my mind was racing. Why was Mark here? Was he involved with these families? Could he be the one who was sending me those messages? Later that night, safe in Theo's arms, I felt a deep sense of dread. The peace we had found felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. What are you thinking about? Theo murmured against my skin. That I love you, I thought. That I am terrified. That I have no idea how our story ends. It ends with us together, he said, his voice full of conviction. Everything else is just noise. I desperately wanted to believe him. Just then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from an unknown number. I warned you. It is too late now. What happens next is your fault. Before I could even show him, the penthouse alarm began to scream. Theo was out of bed in an instant. He pulled on his pants and grabbed the gun he kept in the bedside table. Stay here, he ordered. Lock this door. Do not open it for anyone but me or Amy. Theo. He stopped and kissed me, hard and fast. I love you, he said. Remember that, no matter what happens. Then he was gone. I was left alone with the piercing alarm and the crushing certainty that our borrowed time was over. Through the heavy door, I heard men shouting, followed by the sound of gunfire. Glass shattered. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed Amy. Stay where you are, she said the moment she answered. We are handling it. What is going on? A Bratva hit team, she said. They broke through the first level of security. Theo has this. Just stay put. The line went dead. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, wearing only Theo's shirt. Every nerve screamed at me to run, but I had promised him my trust. The violence continued for what felt like hours, then it slowly faded into an unnerving silence. The handle on the bedroom door began to turn. I scrambled backward, searching for a weapon. Tessa, it is me. It was Theo's voice, ragged with exhaustion. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door. He stood there, his clothes torn and a cut bleeding over his eye. But he was alive. It is over, he said. They are gone. You are safe. I threw myself into his arms, and he held me tightly. I thought, when I heard the shots, I started. Shh, he whispered. I am fine. We are fine. He carried me to the bed and explained the attack had failed. It will not happen again, he vowed. I am tripling security. This place will be a fortress. This is my fault, isn't it? Because you claimed me. No, this is because the Bratva saw an opening. They thought they could use you to hurt me. He tilted my chin up, making me meet his gaze. But they were wrong. All they did was make me angry. And tomorrow, they will learn what that means. The cold fury in his voice should have scared me. Instead, I felt completely safe. I saw someone tonight, I said quietly. At the party, it was my ex-boyfriend Mark. Theo became perfectly still. Tell me everything about him. So I did. I told him about our relationship, the money he had left me with, and how he had vanished. When I was done, Theo's face was a thoughtful mask. Marco, he called out. His advisor appeared at the door. I want a full background check on a man named Mark Harris. Theo looked at me for confirmation. I want to know who he works for and why he was at that gala. His voice was dangerously calm. Get his phone records. I want to know if he is the one contacting Tessa. The realization hit me. You think he sent the threats? I think it is too much of a coincidence that your ex reappears on the same night we are attacked. He kissed my forehead. We will find out. And if he has been threatening you, he said, his voice trailing off. He did not need to finish the sentence. We stayed up for the rest of the night. Theo coordinated with his security teams while the evidence of the attack was quietly removed. By morning, Marco had the first pieces of information. Mark Harris works as a financial consultant, he said. His clients include firms with known connections to the Bratva. It could be a coincidence. Or it could be something more. Bring him in, Theo ordered. I want to talk with Mr. Harris. You cannot just take him, I said. I am not taking him. I am inviting him to a meeting. If he has any sense, he will come. His eyes were like ice. And if he is not smart, we will do this the hard way. 2 days later, I was back in Theo's office. I watched through one-way glass as Mark was shown into the conference room. He looked terrified, his eyes darting around the room. Theo entered, and the color drained from Mark's face. Mr. Harris, he said, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Mark's voice was thin. There is always a choice. You have made some interesting ones lately. Working with Bratva associates, attending a gala you could never afford, following my fiancé. Theo's voice was light. The casual tone made it much more frightening. I am just curious what your reasons are. I do not know what you are talking about. Theo pushed a folder across the polished table. Inside were phone records, text messages from burner phones, photos of you watching Tessa's apartment. Shall I go on? Mark finally broke. I was trying to protect her, he cried. She has no idea what she is involved in with you. I have heard stories, Mr. Valentini, terrible stories. So you decided threatening her was the answer? I thought if she was scared enough, she would leave you before you got her killed. Mark's eyes were wild with desperation. I really loved her. I know I messed things up, but I never wanted this for her. Through the glass, I felt a strange flicker of pity. His plan was foolish, but his fear for me had been real. Theo leaned back. This is what will happen now, Mr. Harris. You will stop contacting Tessa. You will leave Chicago. And you will pray that I never think of you again. Because if you ever enter her life again, I will make you wish you were never born. The threat was spoken so softly, it was almost a whisper, making it absolutely terrifying. I understand, Mark breathed. Good. A plane ticket to San Francisco is waiting for you. I have also arranged a job interview for you there. Take it. Start over. Forget Tessa Morgan ever existed. Theo stood up. Or stay and face me. Your choice. After Mark was gone, Theo came back to me. He was telling the truth, he said. His intentions were not evil, just misguided. He will leave, and if he does not, I will handle it. He pulled me close. I do not think he will be a problem. He is finally scared enough to be smart. With that threat gone, our lives found a quiet rhythm. We spent our days working together and our evenings with his family. 1 month later, on the terrace of his estate, he officially proposed with a ring that had belonged to his mother. My mother's health was improving. Her doctors were hopeful. She met Theo over a video call and gave us her blessing with tears in her eyes. He loves you, she told me. I can see it in his eyes. You are his entire world. He is a dangerous man, Mom. His world. Life is dangerous, she replied. But love is the only thing that makes the danger worth it. She smiled warmly through the screen. Be happy, my girl. You deserve it. 6 months after I first walked into his office, I stood in a guest house, wearing a simple and elegant wedding dress. I looked like a woman from a fairy tale. Ready? Rosa asked, fixing my veil. I am terrified, I admitted. Good, she said, squeezing my hand. That means you understand. I have never seen my brother so happy. You gave him a reason to live for something beyond all of this. You gave him hope. The ceremony was small, attended only by family and the few men Theo trusted with his life. We were married on the estate, overlooking the water, with Rosa and Marco as our witnesses. When Theo watched me walk toward him, his eyes filled with a look of pure disbelief. You came, he said quietly when I stood before him. Did you have doubts? From the day I met you, I have waited for you to see that you deserved more. I waited for you to wake up and see the man I really am. I held his hands, feeling the rough skin, the power, and the softness that he showed only to me. I know exactly who you are, Theo Valentini, and I am still choosing you. I am choosing us. Then we should make it official. Mrs. Valentini. The name was a thrill. Mrs. Valentini, the wife of Theo, partner to one of Chicago's most feared men. After the ceremony, after the kiss and the celebration, Theo took me aside. I have a gift for you. He gave me an envelope. Wait until we are alone to open it. Later that night, in our bedroom on the estate, I opened the envelope. Inside was the deed for a building in downtown Chicago, along with a note. The note was in Theo's perfect script. He wrote that the property was mine to do with as I wished. I could build a business, create a charity, or leave it untouched. It was in my name, and my name alone. He explained that even though I belonged to him, I must always remember I was my own person. That my power was my own, not something he granted me. He loved me because I challenged him and kept him from becoming a monster. He signed it, Forever yours, T. I went to the terrace where he stood watching the lake. As I came closer, he turned, and I could see the softness in his eyes. I told him it was too much. He said it would never be enough to make up for the past. He gathered me in his arms. But it is a start, he whispered. It is a promise that you will always have a choice. We were husband and wife, two souls from separate worlds who had found one another. The future was a dangerous path. His work would always attract enemies, but we would walk that path as one. We were bound by love, choice, and a vow to keep each other safe. Tessa's journey is a reminder that we do not get to choose who we love or where we find safety. She walked into a world of violence and power, expecting nothing but a paycheck, and she found the one person who saw her, truly saw her, when she had spent her whole life trying to disappear. Sometimes strength is not about running from danger. It is about standing still and choosing the life that terrifies you, because it is the only life that feels real. Do you regret any of it? Theo asked. I let my mind drift back over our story. The pregnancy scare that was never real. The 2 years I spent aching for him in silence. The violent truth that tore everything open. The constant threat of danger. I have only one regret, I said. I felt him stiffen. What is it? That I wasted so much time trying to be invisible, I answered. I could have been with you all along. His smile was possessive and fierce, yet filled with absolute love. Then we will have to make up for all that lost time, Mrs. Valentini. And we did. For every day of our lives, we did. If Tessa and Theo's story made your heart race, drop a comment below. Have you ever fallen for someone the world told you to stay away from? Hit that like button if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, share it with someone who believes in the power of unexpected love, and subscribe so you never miss a story that will stay with you long after the last word. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and inspiration to our audience. Thank you for listening.